My name is Cherry. I am the General Manager at Royal Lifesaving ACT. We are joined this morning by Rebecca Kelley, who's the Executive Branch Manager at ACT Sport and Recreation Services. Thank you so much for joining us, Beck. It means a lot to have you here and just to provide some clarification around the current restrictions and in the context of swim schools and swimming pools. It's really valuable to have your input this morning. Everybody, we're going to take you through a bit of a presentation, so I will do a share screen in a moment and you will see that slideshow as we go through. Like I've mentioned, if you can just stay muted and stay with your video hidden and turned off for now, that would be really helpful. This session is being recorded. It will be sent out along with the PowerPoint presentation afterwards, so if you miss something, you can take that opportunity to catch up. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can pop them into the chat on the right and we will come back to them, or just make a note at your end and you can raise them in the Q&A at the end. There will be Q&A for Rebecca and for myself, and obviously an opportunity for everybody to share their experiences, plans, etc. with each other. So it really is a forum in the true sense of the word, and we want to make sure that we're providing that platform for networking and connections across the industry. There are a number of links embedded into the PowerPoint presentation, just so that you know. The final slide, as you'll see, excuse me, provides an extra list of resources and links online that might be beneficial to you. And I'll explain those when we get to that section of the prezo. But just so that you know, when you do get that PowerPoint presentation through, the links are embedded. So wherever you see an underlined section of text, there's a helpful link embedded there for you. So when that comes through, you'll have all of those links and resources at your disposal. So without further ado, I will share my screen with you and we will jump into our presentation. If you can give me a heads up that you can actually see the online swim school forum, that would be super helpful. Great, okay. So welcome everybody. We'll jump straight in. I've done our welcome. Here we go. Beck, give me a nod if you can see my welcome screen. Sweet. Alrighty. I just have to work out my mouse here. So just out of interest for everybody, the survey that we sent out, thank you to those of you who were able to respond. Here's just a little snapshot of what we got back. So we received 16 responses in total, representing 10 swim schools throughout the ACT. So that's actually really quite an amazing response and clearly demonstrates the need for input and clarification in this area for our local industry. So thank you. 87% of you said that you have not reopened yet, and that is expected from my end, but I'm not sure how that sits at your end, but it gives you an idea of what everybody else is doing. So only about 13% of swim schools who responded have actually reopened. And out of that list of topics that was provided to see what you wanted to talk about today, the biggest one was the social distancing or physical distancing in the water, and how are we going to manage that for our swimming lessons. So 100% of people said, yeah, we need to talk about that. Obviously, safely managing equipment was the next top topic, and then managing conflict arising from COVID-19 matters or issues. And then half of you said you wanted to talk about qualifications and training and COVID safe plans and the development of. So we will cover all of those things this morning. And like I said, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat for us and we will come back to them. All right, so just jumping into our venue capacity and the current restrictions. What I'm going to do is just hand over to Beck to provide some clarification in the context of swim schools and how these apply. The dot points you can see on your screen have been taken directly from the FAQ document that ACT Sport and Recreation Services have published on their website. And the current restrictions underlined text at the bottom of the slide is where the embedded link, excuse me, to that document will be once you receive this slideshow. So Beck, I'll just hand over to you to talk to those dot points.
Thanks, Cherry. We're still seeing the welcome screen. I'm not sure whether that's just me. You can
that's unfortunate.
down.
Thank you. Well, that is, let me just fix this up here. Probably should have had a practice run, hey?
Oh, good. Now we're going.
Okay, what can we see now?
Now we can see the survey results.
Great. Here we go. Venue capacity.
That's the one. Thank you. Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, good morning, everyone. It's great to be a part of the Zoom meeting this morning, just to provide a little bit more clarity where we can around the current restrictions and how you can interpret that for the conduct and operation of your swim schools. So as Cherry said, we'll just quickly go over what the current restrictions are as per phase 2.2 of public health directions. These are restrictions in the ACT. These came into effect on the 19th of June. And we're moving towards a hopeful phase 3 on the 10th of July. So just to run through those, that for swimming pools or aquatic facilities at the moment, it's the rule is up to 100 people in any single enclosed space, or a maximum of 1 person per 4 metre squares, whichever is lesser. So the swimming pools have been one area where we've seen fairly change with each step of the years of restrictions, where it was initially per pool and then per facility, and we've seen a gradual increase of swimmers per lane. So we're now at 4 lap swimmers per lane, and the spectator allowance, noting that we are limited to number of people within an enclosed venue, is it's 1 parent or carer for each junior participant, and that's consistent right across the sports sector, whether it be an outdoor soccer field, indoor basketball stadium, or indeed a pool. And the hydrotherapy and pools for other therapeutic purposes have been allowed open from right at the phase 1 ease of restrictions. So they're the current, I guess, your key things you have to understand out of the public health directions. But in and around that, there are a lot of guidance points as well, which I think if we skip to the next screen, Cherry, then we can just make sure everyone's aware of those as well. So the 4 metres squared per person, or the up to 100 people in an enclosed space, is in the public health directions. 1.5 metres distancing is not. That's a guidance that we need to try and abide by to really have our head around what physical distancing means. So that applies to spectators and other people within the venue, and we'll talk obviously to your concerns about how you manage that as an instructor and student actually within a class. But I think the key point on that page there when we get to that discussion is where it is practical. And so it's, just to remind you, 1.5 metres is not mandated in the directions, but the 1 person per 4 metres squared is. We are now under a direction where change rooms can open. And this was a particular discussion that the Chief Health Officer had, noting that it is getting chilly and we certainly don't want risk of other illnesses by people being in the water and then moving outside. So the change rooms at all sporting facilities can now open for access, assuming that the 1 person per 4 square metre rules is being abided by at all times, and that the centre itself is implementing regular cleaning and hygiene regimes in support of your patrons. Oh, which is a nice little segue to the next one. But yeah, I mean, the hygiene and cleaning, along with physical distancing, has obviously been the key messaging that we've been hearing throughout the health crisis. Hand hygiene is the #1 thing that the Health Office is putting front and centre all the time. And along with good respiratory hygiene of just being aware of your proximity and your respiratory secretions and your proximity to others. Particularly when we get to talking about how you're managing your classes, the key thing is that anyone that is unwell needs to stay at home, whether that be an instructor or a student coming into the centre. And that's something that you may need to think about how that is being checked as people enter the pool environments as well. Equipment, I know, was a specific question, so we will talk that in a little bit more detail soon. But again, this is a guidance. It's not a direction within the public health direction. Is that equipment may be shared and that it needs to be cleaned where possible in between sessions. And that's really a risk management issue for you. It's not a direct requirement where you need to be cleaning individual items after each use. But so we can talk about that a little bit more as we go through. So these are the three questions, aren't they, Cherry, that came out of the
yeah, so these are the three questions we received in advance. So if these prompt any further questions for you, like I said, pop them in the chat and we will get to them. And if we don't get to them now, we will get to them at the end. But these are the ones we received prior to conducting the forum today. So I've asked Beck just to provide a government perspective on the answers to these questions.
And I can say the answers to these questions have been, I guess, overseen by the ACT Chief Health Officer's office, because I guess one of the things that we've found throughout this process is that as each ease of restriction measure has come into place, that our sporting environments has been one of the trickiest application areas for the community because each of our environments is so very different. So with respect to that first one about which should take priority, it is the 4 square metres per person that needs to take priority. The 4 swimmers per lane is for lap swimmers only. So I have the clarification for you that you don't need to limit 4 people per segment that you might be conducting a swim class in. It is so long as there's enough room within your venue for the number of people that you have there for each person to have 4 square metres around them, then that is okay. So I know that still sounds probably a bit tricky in how you manage that, but it comes back to my point before, is that the 1.5 metre distancing is only where practical. So if I was to skip down to probably going into the last question there around whether swim teachers can have contact, but it is where you have a venue large enough to maintain the distancing required, so the 1 per 4 metre square person. If that means that you need to move in and out of the spacing of the 1.5 physical distance guidance in order to undertake the activity, that is okay. And it's really just being mindful of physical distancing where possible. So your parents on the side, on the pool deck and the seating, for example, they should absolutely be physically distancing the whole time of the 1.5, and you need to remind them of that. But within the pool, within the water, instructors and participants can interact as they need to in order for you to undertake a safe lesson as you would normally. With respect to the equipment needing to be sanitised, as I said before, that is a guidance only. It's not a direction, but it is where you just need to take a precautionary approach. So obviously it's not practical to be cleaning every single item after every single use, but at the end of each lesson would probably be a reasonable expectation. And even having hand sanitizer stations next to the pool for instructors and students, perhaps as they're coming in, they're just the sort of practices that you could put in place to increase your sanitisation where you can. Think about the types of equipment that are more difficult to clean and perhaps limit use of those. So pool needles and things that soak up a little bit more. And I don't know whether there's any way around that, but it's items like that where you just maybe need to think about that in your risk assessment. And so long as you're identifying these risks in your COVID safe plans, then really you're taking reasonable and precautionary steps as you need to. I don't know whether I can cover any more on that last one around can swim teachers have contact, because the answer is yes. But as I said, it just needs to be with caution. Obviously, if your instructors are unwell, they shouldn't be coming to work. If students coming into the centre are unwell, then they should be asked to go home, or just have that messaging that perhaps parents are aware of, that they're not coming in the first place. And it's really just a common sense approach in and around that. But in short, you should be able to conduct the class as you would normally, with the number of children you would normally, assuming that your entire centre is big enough to accommodate the 100 people that are currently permitted to be in there.
Great, thank you so much, Beck, for that clarification. I think that probably provides a lot of people with a sense of relief in not having to think about, or how are we going to teach beginners how to swim what if we're on the side of the pool? How are we going to keep 5-year-olds 1.5 metres away from each other? So that's really good news, in that we can return to some sense of normality within our swim schools, and we don't have to be over the top with these restrictions. And I'll just reiterate that this is all under the current staging and levels of restrictions in the ACT. So if that does change, for example, if we see a spill of this outbreak from Victoria and we have to go backwards, or something like that, we'll obviously keep you posted, but please keep an eye on the current guidelines being put out from ACT Government and ACT Sport and Recreation Services.
Mary, I might just one other quick thing there is that advice is also in accordance with other areas within the sector, because we are seeing that full contact training is now permitted. So where there's that full contact training in other sporting environments, and coaches needing to have perhaps hands-on technique work in some areas as well, and utilise their normal coaching practices, that is, as I said, that's consistent right across the aquatic arena, as well as other indoor and outdoor sports.
Fantastic. And Beck, I might just take this opportunity to clarify, there has been a bit of confusion across the industry, and not just locally, but nationally as well, in terms of which sector swim schools should more closely align themselves with in terms of the restrictions. So we've had some swim schools saying, oh, we're an educational institution, we will, schools are back, so we should abide by those restrictions. And other swim schools saying, well, we're a part of the sport and recreation industry, and there's different restrictions for that sector. So which would you say that our swim schools and pools obviously should be looking at more closely?
Absolutely, the sporting sector rules, because education rules, where we saw education environments move back, where the restrictions didn't apply to enable educational institutions to return, that was very specific to designated school sites. So even where schools had pools on site, it could only be used for curriculum use with students. And if there was a community hire or swim school that had community participants outside of school hours, that's when the sporting sector rules would come into play, in terms of whether it be 10, 20 or up to 100 participants now. And so, certainly my advice going forward is that it's the sporting sector rules that you should be keeping an eye on.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, so we will move on to from clarifying the current restrictions to providing some advice and insight around your COVID safe plans. So there is a strong recommendation, correct my wording, Beck, if I'm being a little light there, but a strong recommendation from government that every sporting entity, including swimming pools and swim schools, should have their own COVID safe plan, or return to play in a COVID safe environment plan, developed and ready to go prior to restarting or reactivating their activities. So we'll just give you a bit of insight into the minimum, so base level content that a plan like that should have. There is also, as you can see, the COVID safe plans title at the bottom of these slides. There is an embedded link there to the ACT Sport and Recreation Services support document on their website. At the end of the slideshow, there's also a few other links that will help you to inform the development of that plan and potentially the content as well. So firstly, there obviously needs to be a risk assessment, and this is let's be honest, a butt covering activity, and you should be in this industry well across it. You should have your standard established templates and documentation surrounding your risk assessment and risk management approaches in your centres and schools. So what we would look at including, excuse me, in your risk assessment is the basic consideration of consequence versus likelihood of COVID-19 transmission occurring within your venue or activity. And then obviously if that leads to an outbreak from there. So you would go through and do those consequence versus likelihood considerations, come up with a risk rating, and then document very clearly how you will control that risk. You would create an action plan for how you will put those controls in place, implement your action plan, get it done, keep very accurate records of when and how often you apply those controls, and then set timeframes for the review of your risk assessments and your action plans. And, you know, whilst normally we would have standard risk assessments that require review perhaps every 6 or 12 months, in these circumstances, the recommendation would be to align your timeframes for review with the restriction reviews and the stages of restrictions. So every time there's a planned change to the restrictions in the ACT, you should be reviewing your risk assessment and how you align with those restrictions. Within your COVID safe plan, you should also have a communication plan that considers how you will communicate to both your staff and patrons. And that includes the children in your swimming lessons and their parents. So perhaps different types of communication will be required there, but you may have established new policies and procedures to manage this COVID safe environment that you are now creating, and certainly new expectations from your parents and participants and your staff too. So a bit of a plan on how you will communicate all of that information to those different stakeholders. You will need a plan, again, of what information to communicate, who it's going to, and how and when you will communicate that on an ongoing basis. Implement your plan to make sure that all the information you include and that you are disseminating through your contacts is up to date and as per government advice. The last thing you want to be doing in an environment like this is making things up. So reference all of the government advice and websites. We're hoping to provide you a little bit more of a foundation knowledge through this forum rather than just, you know, look at the website. But it is highly recommended that you make those links and references for your within your communication plans, obviously. Again, those communication plans will need to be reviewed against your set timeframes. Just give me a heads up if I'm going too fast. Lastly, within your COVID safe plans, and just as a base minimum, I'm not saying that this is the end of what you would include in your plan. There will be much more information that you should be including, but at a minimum, we're looking at risk assessments, communication plans, and an incident response plan. So if it does happen that you have a case of positive COVID-19 or transmission of COVID-19 within your venue or activity, how are you going to identify it to start with? How are you going to implement a plan for tracking close contact for all staff and patrons so that if you do need to respond to that incident, you can do it clearly and efficiently and cooperate with government services in that area. You will need to establish protocols for exclusion from activity and or isolation. So at what level, at what point will you say that's an unacceptable risk for us? Is it when Johnny's mum calls up and says, Johnny has a snivelly nose today, he's not coming to swimming lessons? Do we say, don't bring him back for 2 weeks then? Or do we say, okay, we'll bring in a medical certificate next week and we're good to go? So you will need to set your protocols and expectations around that. Don't wait until it happens to have to make something up on the spot. Again, the timeframes for review of your response plan is really important. And something else you might want to consider is extra training in that area for your staff, your swim school teachers, for your management and administrators, and potentially for lifeguards if you have them on site as well. All right, moving on from our COVID safe plan inclusions, and like I said, this slideshow will go out to everybody, so you'll have all of those notes for yourselves. But qualifications and training was something else that people said they would like to know more about. So I've just put up a summary here of the intended recommencement training dates for Royal Lifesaving in the ACT, and we have collaborated with Ausswim on this, so we have adjusted delivery methods and delivery plans where required. Some of the accredited courses that we deliver do require close contact for to be able to accurately assess somebody's competency when they're demonstrating the practical skills in our courses. So that is why we haven't been able to return to full aquatic training as yet. First aid and CPR courses have already returned and they're available. We have remote assessment options that are also available for people who aren't comfortable yet in attending face-to-face courses. And that remote assessment option simply involves the online learning portion as normal, but then the participant can upload a video of themselves demonstrating their practical skills, or they can book a live video session if they want that instant feedback from one of our trainers. So you can basically complete your first aid and CPR from your lounge room these days. We will keep that product on scope. It's especially helpful for people who live regionally as well once we exit these COVID-19 times. But for now, that will remain for anybody who's not comfortable being in a training room with others. Like I said, we have adjusted our training and delivery plans. So we've got smaller groups, heightened cleaning and hygiene methods, etc. But those key dates in front of you, Ausswim courses will be available in the ACT from the 17th of July. That's public courses. Pool lifeguard courses will be available from the 1st of July for groups only. And this is so that we can get a bit of a head start with larger leisure centres with those pool lifeguards. We can get them back up on track and make sure that they are qualified and ready to go as our pools are reopening. So we'll be doing clustered assessment for those groups, and that's for colleagues and workmates who are already working together and already likely to be coming into close contact with each other. Same goes for bronze medallion courses. There are a couple of venues in the ACT who require their pool attendants to be bronze medallion qualified. So the same goes with those courses. We will be conducting group clustered courses only from the 1st of July, and then public courses will become available with amendments and adjustments as necessary from the 17th of July. There are some additional training and development suggestions that I've just thrown up here. So we have recommended across our entire organisation that all staff are inducted to the Australian Government COVID-19 Infection Control course. It's a free online course, and the link is embedded there in the slideshow for you. Royal Lifesaving has a conflict management professional development online learning course, which is coming out, is going to be available very soon. So for those of you who indicated that one of the topics you wanted to cover today, whilst we won't go in depth about it today, that professional development module will be coming available very soon. So I will keep the industry updated on when that is available. There will be a cost to it, but there will be, it will count towards your Ausswim, so swim teacher professional development points, and pool lifeguard professional development as well. Royal Lifesaving Swim and Survive online induction. So there is an online course available. It's free for the time being, and that might be helpful for those of you who are delivering Swim and Survive or who want to give your swim teachers a different programming perspective. particularly in the areas of those life-saving and rescue skills. If you're delivering those within the water safety component of your core program, then the Swim and Survive online induction really does give swim teachers a good overview of how to teach those skills. And we also have another course coming out shortly, Teacher of Life Saving, which is actually a separate qualification altogether. And that's designed to be an add-on to the Auswim Teacher of Swimming and Water Safety. So just to clarify the instruction process and skill progression for those life-saving skills. And I've just popped another one on the bottom there just to make sure we're considering our staff well-being and mental wellness as well. These times have taken toll on a lot of people, particularly the mental stress and juggling with working at home and families or not working, lack of income. There's so many different factors and it's affected everybody so differently. So there is a mental health skills training course, which is an online course and it's free. Excuse me, it's free. And that, again, the link is embedded there for you if you wanted to check that out or make it available for your staff. And lastly, just moving on to that links and resources page I mentioned that would be available for you. There's a range, hopefully the names of the links there are pretty self-explanatory, but there are some ACT specific links. There's a link to the Royal Lifesaving Society Australia COVID-19 guideline, which is a specific guideline within the GSPO that was created for COVID-19 management in aquatic facilities. Now that one, normally it's under subscription. We can only access the guidelines for safe pool operation with a subscription online. However, that particular guideline has been made publicly available, so anybody can access that guideline. The AIS Reboot Framework is up there for you. Swim Australia's national guidelines for restarting a club. Now it is framed within the context of a swim club. However, it can be easily transferred to swim school environments as well. New South Wales government have gone as far as providing a safety plan template. So the COVID-19 safety plans that we were talking about earlier, there is a template for Swimming New South Wales and for New South Wales government. Please keep in mind, however, that sometimes, you know, although we're trying to keep up with each other, the restrictions and rules can differ slightly from New South Wales to ACT. So just make sure that if you are using those templates, that you adjust them accordingly for the ACT, particularly paying particular attention to some of the links in there. All right, so that's the end of the actual initial presentation. Thank you for bearing with us through that, and I hope it's been informative for you. We will open for a general Q&A. So if you've got questions for either Beck or myself, let me know. We do have one that's just come through in the chat. So Beck, I'm not sure if you can see that from Natalie, but Natalie has said, you mentioned earlier that 4 swimmers per lane is reference to lap swimmers. You also mentioned that swim schools could exceed the 4 per lane number, particularly if we are using teaching segments, and we can still comply with the 4 metre square rule. Is there any written clarification on this ruling for swim schools?
We can certainly arrange for it. So Natalie, your summary there is spot on. And so what we will look to do is to update our FAQs, as I said, because this is not part of the health direction, it is coming as guidance. So I'll have the FAQs that are on the Sport and Recreation website, and there's also a reference to them on the ACT COVID-19 site, is we'll have that updated to have this clarification for swim schools, just so you have it in writing. So hopefully that's.
Thank you, Beck. We'll just give you a couple of seconds. Feel free to unmute yourself or share your video with us or pop your questions in the chat. Give us a thumbs up if you're good to go. Some indication that this has been at all helpful. Obviously, if you have anything that comes out of this that you'd like to talk to either myself or Beck about offline, then please feel free to do so. I can put you in touch with Beck. So just, you've got all my contact details directly. Everybody here, I sent the Outlook invites directly from my personal email, so you can contact me on that just by replying. Otherwise, if everybody is good, I haven't got any other questions pop up in the chat yet. Been very helpful, thank you. And just to clarify, yes, that PowerPoint will be sent out to you, as well as the recorded version of this forum session. So once again, thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll end it there and hopefully talk to you all soon. Good luck with your reopening. Thanks, everybody.